Today, we're looking at a fundamental economic shift happening in Nepal. And, it's not being driven by a new policy or a trade deal, but by concrete and steel. We're talking about the beginning of Nepal's tunnel age, and specifically how a project like the new Nagdhunga tunnel is set to deliver a huge dividend to the entire economy. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll get into the numbers behind that 18% dividend. Then, we'll look at how this acts as a shock absorber for inflation. After that, we'll explore the real power of building a network of these tunnels. Fourth, we'll discuss the strategic choice Nepal is facing right now. And finally, we'll talk about the real mountain that actually needs to be moved. Anyone who's ever driven that highway knows this feeling in their bones. That slow, painful, unpredictable journey, it's been like a silent tax on every single thing that comes into the Kathmandu Valley. It's this logistics drag that inflates costs, holds back growth, and has basically put a ceiling on the country's economic potential. Well, until now. Okay, let's get into the main number. The headline figure everyone's talking about is an 18% cut in logistics costs. So how exactly do we arrive at that number? What does it really mean? This 18%, this is the baseline. It's the direct, immediate savings for every single truck that will now go through the Nagdhunga tunnel instead of crawling over that treacherous Thankut Pass. It's a powerful, tangible figure right off the bat. But, and this is really important, that 18% is just the starting line. Think of it as a conservative floor. Once you start factoring in all the ripple effects, like smarter inventory management, the actual savings for a business could easily push closer to 25, maybe even 30%. And this chart here breaks down exactly where those initial savings are coming from. Look at that biggest slice. Almost 40% comes from labor and asset productivity. I mean, it's simple. The same truck and the same driver can get more done in less time. Then you've got a big 25% chunk from fuel savings, obviously. Another 19% comes from lower costs for maintenance and repairs, and the rest is rounded out by other efficiencies. Now, here's the crucial part. These savings don't just stop with the trucking companies. Oh no, they actually cascade through the entire economy, and they can affect the price you pay for everyday goods. Let's walk through how that works. So right now, logistics in Nepal runs on what you could call a just-in-case model. Because you never know when a delay will hit, businesses have to hoard massive amounts of extra stock. That's just dead capital sitting in a warehouse, and guess who pays for it? You do, the consumer. But the tunnel, it brings predictability, and that allows a massive shift to a lean, efficient, just-in-time model. Less waste, lower costs. The logic here is just incredibly simple and direct. The tunnel creates reliability. That reliability makes just-in-time supply chains a reality. For businesses, this means their inventory costs plummet. And in a competitive market, those savings have to be passed on to consumers. The end result? Lower prices. And we can actually quantify this impact. Our analysis suggests this whole shift could shave as much as 1.25 percentage points off Kathmandu's annual inflation rate. Now think about that. In an economy where rising prices constantly eat away at your savings, that is a massive benefit for every single family. But look, if we only focus on the Nagdhunga tunnel by itself, we're completely missing the bigger picture here. The real transformative power isn't in one single project. It's in the network that it can create. The real game changer is a concept called the network effect. And it's pretty simple. Two tunnels aren't just twice as good as one. Their combined value is exponentially greater. It's a multiplier effect. Okay, so the Nagdhunga tunnel is the first critical piece of the puzzle, the first node in the network. It solves a huge bottleneck on one incredibly vital economic artery into the capital. But now, imagine you add the next key project, the Siddhababa tunnel, which connects the Terai heartland with Pokhara. Suddenly, you don't just have two separate improved roads. You have created a brand new, integrated, and reliable internal trade system. You're connecting the country's industrial hubs to its biggest consumer markets with a level of reliability that's never been seen before. That is the network effect in action. And all of this brings Nepal to a really critical moment, a strategic crossroads. The potential here is absolutely immense. But let's be clear, it is not guaranteed. There are really two clear paths forward. On one hand, you have the piecemeal approach. We treat each tunnel as a separate project. Maybe it takes a decade to build each one. The benefits are small, localized, and slow to arrive. But then, there's the accelerated network path. This is where a dedicated authority fast-tracks a whole portfolio of these critical projects.
making that network effect the primary goal. That is the path to real economic transformation.
So the question for policymakers, for investors, and for the public is pretty straightforward. Which path will it be? And this isn't something that just happens. It's an active, strategic choice that has to be made right now. And that brings us to our final and maybe most important point. The biggest obstacle to making this vision reality, well, it isn't actually rock and soil. Let's face it, the engineering challenges, they can be solved. The real challenge is what you might call the software of infrastructure. Things like transparent procurement, fast and fair land acquisition, a stable regulatory environment. These are now way more critical than the hardware of drills and concrete. I mean, the initial delays on the Nagdhunga project weren't about geology. They were about bureaucracy. And that really leaves us with this one final thought. As Nepal enters its new tunnel age, building a new, efficient administrative process is every bit as important as drilling through mountains. Because at the end of the day, the true mountain that really has to be moved is bureaucracy.